In this video, we will be setting up a software simulation using some SmartBuilder templates. We'll look at how to define incorrect areas that show hints, and how to define the correct areas that allow us to move on. We'll also look at how to set up text input fields that check for a specific answer. We'll mostly be using one type of template, but we will discuss the differences and the benefits of the other templates. There are 4 different software simulation templates, but they all work in pretty much the same way. The Let Me Try template is the most straightforward, so we'll be spending most of our time looking at that. It has a series of hotspots, or text input fields, that allow you to progress through the simulation. If you get something wrong, you get a hint. If you get it correct, you get to move on. The Show Me template allows a learner to try, but also provides a next button. This is less challenging and might be used to show how something is done rather than letting the learner explore. The step-by-step challenge template provides instructions at each step, like Let Me Try, but it also keeps track of correct actions, incorrect actions, how many times the hint feature was used, and also has a task efficiency meter, which shows the ratio of correct actions to incorrect actions. The whole task challenge is very similar to the step-by-step challenge, but rather than providing instructions for each step, it gives instructions on the whole task. And the learner must navigate the task with less handholding. This is the best template for challenging your learners to think, since it mimics a real-world scenario. Here is a task, please complete it. It also has the correct actions, incorrect actions, the hint feature, and the task efficiency. Before we begin, we've already planned out our simulation and have prepared our screen grabs. So to get started, we'll go back to our lesson, and we will apply a template. So we'll go up to Template, Apply Template, click on the Software Simulation category, and we'll choose the Let Me Try template. This template comes with some layers. There's the base layer, which just has the negative feedback sound. The start layer, which has some instructions. It's a good idea to load your first image here so that it acts as a background. Then there are 2 interactive layers. A click layer, which uses hotspots, and a text input layer, which uses a text input object to capture what the learner types. Finally, there is the end layer, which lets them know that they have completed the simulation. We're mostly concerned with these 2 interactive layers, which we will basically be copying and pasting and then customizing. So let's get started with our intro background. So we'll go to our Start page and then double-click to select an image. There's also a mask here, which will mask out the image behind it, but that's hidden by default. Next, we'll customize our intro message. Then we'll go to our first click layer and load in that same image. The images that we have are a little too big for our default page size. So we'll want to change our stage size to match our images. We can do that by going up to Edit, Lesson Settings, and choosing Custom and filling in the page size that we need. Here in this layer, we have our correct hotspot, our hint, and our instructions. We also have a large incorrect hotspot that's covering the rest of the clickable area. So we'll need to make that a little bit bigger to match our new larger stage size. And I'll hide that again. Now we're ready to start moving our correct hotspot and our hint around. So I'll move this correct hotspot over the login button, because that's where we want them to click. And I'll also move my hint arrow to point to it. If I want to change what type of arrow this is, I can click on the shape icon and then choose a different arrow. So this one points up, and I'll place it there. Then I'll paste in the new instructions. If we show our incorrect hotspot again, now we can see whenever they click anywhere in the red zone, the hint will show up, but if they click on the green hotspot, it will move to the next layer. At runtime, the learners won't see the red or the green. Our next step happens to be a text input step. So we'll go to the text input layer and then load our second image in here. We'll update our instructions. And we can move that over if we like. And then start customizing our page. So we have the text input object, which we're going to place directly above this text input field in the screen grab below. And we can also move this hint arrow. That will be shown if they don't know where to click. And then we have a text hint that we can also show. This will show up if they type something incorrect into the text input field. So if we didn't want to use this, we could just place it off screen, or we just need to place it somewhere near our text input. So here I'll paste in some hint text. And then finally, we'll move our correct hotspot over where we want them to click next. In this case, it will be the password field. So we'll place that. We'll also need to update what the correct text is. That can be done with this text object here. It won't show up, but I'm going to place it off screen anyway. So here I can paste in the text that they need to type in on the input field in order to mark this step as complete. Whenever you're dealing with text, make sure to watch out for trailing or leading spaces. The next step is another text input field, so we'll go up to our text input layer, right-click, and choose Duplicate. This creates a copy, and we'll need to layer it so that it comes next. And now we'll need to start customizing it. So I'll swap the background image. And then move my correct hotspot over the sign in button. Move my input text object down. Update my instructions. And also move my 2 hints. I'll also need to update the correct text. And for this particular step, the text input field is actually a password. So we'll go over to the properties for that object and change password mode from false to true. For the next step, we want another click example. So we'll come back to our first layer and right-click and duplicate that. Since it's added at the end, we want to drag it to the right place. And then we need to start updating it. So we'll replace the image. Move our hotspot. As well as our hint. And then we'll need to update our instructions. And then we'll just repeat that process for the rest of the steps. This particular step is composed of multiple images. So I'm going to bring in another image, which is just the dropdown, and I'm going to place it where it needs to go. Now, when I bring in a new image, it's going to be layered above the correct hotspot and everything else. So I need to make sure that I rearrange this new image so that it's right above the screenshot. If I have a hard time lining up things, I can select the image, go to the properties, and turn up the transparency. So I'll use about 50% transparency. Maybe I'll hide my correct hotspot. And now I can see the background image and this little drop-down image. And I can use my arrow keys to get it to line up exactly. Now that that looks good, I'll bump the transparency back down to 0 and unhide my correct hotspot and put it where it needs to go. and then finish moving my hint and updating the instructions. And then we'll move on to the next step. In this next step, I don't need this extra drop-down image, so I'll just delete it. And then go back to fixing my hotspots and my hints. Finally, we're left with just the end layer. So I'll go here, double-click on the image, and bring in my end graphic. The default text is fine, as well as the redo and continue buttons. If I need to change it, I can also move this over so that it's centered on the page. Or I can move it all the way over so that I can see the important part of the image. Like with the start layer, there's also a mask that's going to hide the image in the background. And with that, we're done. But wait, we didn't create any actions. How can this possibly work? This template is designed using tag lists and generic actions. If we take a quick look back at some of these steps, we can see that every correct hotspot has a tag of correct, and every incorrect hotspot has a tag of incorrect. Same with the hint arrows. And if we look at the template actions, we can see that any object tagged with correct will move to the next layer. Anything with the tag incorrect will play the negative feedback sound and show a hint. The text input layers work the same way, but they're a little bit more complicated. So when you're modifying this template, be sure not to delete any of the objects, even the hidden ones, like the incorrect hotspot. If you don't want to use something, it's generally recommended to just drag it off screen. Theoretically, you could add additional steps in here. For example, if your simulation involves a drag and drop interaction, but it would take a little bit of work, especially if you're using one of the challenge templates that keep track of the correct and the incorrect actions. So let's test this out. We'll go up to Preview. We see our instructions, as well as the image faded out in the background. When we click Start, we go to the first layer. If I click somewhere incorrect, I hear the negative feedback sound and the hint is shown. If I click on the correct hotspot, we'll move to the next layer in the stack. This is a text input, so I'll need to type in the correct text. If I type it in incorrectly, I'm shown the text hint. And then if I click somewhere incorrectly on the next text input field, I get the hint that tells me where to go. And then the rest of the steps are exactly the same. So if I click anywhere incorrect, I get a hint. If I click on the correct spot, I move forward. Finally, when I get to the end slide, I can see the end result, the mask fades in, and then I get my completion message. The Redo button will reload the page, and the Continue button will move on to the next page in the lesson. Remember, the other templates behave the same way. If we look at the Show Me template. You also have a correct hotspot and an incorrect hotspot, but the next button will just proceed to the next layer. With the step-by-step challenge, again, it's the same thing. But we also have the meter and the correct and incorrect action counts. The only difference here is that the hint will not automatically be shown when the incorrect hotspot is clicked. They'll need to click the Show Hint button, which will increase their hint used count and show the hint. It's the same with the whole task challenge, except this time, instructions are not provided along the way. Instead, there's a single draggable layer where you can put in all of your information, like the step-by-step challenge, the correct actions, incorrect actions, the hint used, and the task efficiency should all be calculated for you based on the correct hotspots and the incorrect hotspots.